Welcome back to Bloomberg's Bottom Line. I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. Thank you so much for staying with us. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce today called U.S. tariffs on Chinese-made tires protectionist. The move follows yesterday's World Trade Organization ruling that upheld the tariffs. China says it will appeal the decision. U.S. Trade Representative Ron Kirk, who's chairing trade talks with Chinese officials in Washington this week, called the WTO ruling a major victory. Ambassador Kirk joins us now from Washington. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to Bloomberg News. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Mark, thank you for having me.
Ambassador Kirk, you are part of the U.S. delegation holding talks, as we mentioned, with your Chinese counterparts. At the top of the agenda, currency issues and allegations of Chinese protectionism. Did these issues come up today?
Well, we actually are going to be beginning our dialogue with China in about 30 minutes. Mark, Secretary of Commerce Gary Locke and I chaired the other half of our strategic engagement with the Chinese. It's called the Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, and versus the Strategic Economic Dialogue led by Secretaries Geithner and Clinton. This is one in that we really get down into the nitty-gritty of dealing with Chinese industrial and economic policy that we believe unfairly either closes their market to American exports, or in some cases we think actually demonstrate is to the disadvantage of U.S. exporters. And so it's a chance for us to engage them in a much more targeted manner to try to deal with some of these challenges.
Mr. Ambassador, I mentioned that WTO ruling yesterday rejecting China's complaint against punitive U.S. tariffs on the tires. What's the impact of that ruling? And we should mention that the Chinese have reacted, Beijing saying the ruling could have a potentially negative impact.
Well, I would say one thing. There's two things, is that it validates the legality of a remedy that the United States and other countries negotiated with China when we agreed to allow them to come into the WTO. And it was under President Obama's leadership that we were the first administration in the last 10 years to ever use that remedy to hold China accountable for flooding our market with cheap goods, in this case tires, that really hurt our domestic auto industry. So one, it validated the legality of that system, it upheld it, and I think a little bit of what we're hearing from China today is the same thing we heard a year ago, but the reality is it shows we will stand up for the rights of American workers and American manufacturers. This is a very good thing.
Mr. Ambassador, our trade deficit's currently 3.6% of GDP. How is that growing trade gap affecting the jobs picture here at home? And if we narrow that trade deficit, isn't that a job-creating engine in and of itself?
Well, I want to be careful. Certainly, Mark, a big part of our rationale behind President Obama's export strategy to rebalance our trade agenda is to get us to building, growing, creating more, and selling that around the world, which is directly correlative to our ability to create jobs. At the same time, it does help us to narrow that trade deficit. But there are many things that contribute to that deficit, some of which is we're buying products and goods and services and materials that we can't get here. But we certainly think it makes sense that for a country and economy like China and other emerging economies that have begun to build up their own capacity by accessing our market, it's only fair that they now open up their markets to U.S. producers and exporters.
Mr. Ambassador, two U.S. senators, the Democrat Sherrod Brown of Ohio, Republican Olympia Snowe of Maine, they proposed the Currency Reform and Fair Trade Act as an amendment to the bill that would temporarily extend all of the Bush tax cuts for another couple of years. Senator Brown did say in his statement addressing Chinese currency manipulation is vital to getting our economy back on track. Does the administration support this measure?
Well, I can't speak to that particular legislation. I haven't seen it. I will say this. President Obama and Secretary of the Treasury Geithner have spoken to the currency issue. That is but one element of our engagement with China to get them to gradually continue their economic reforms and to live up with the commitments they made when we granted them permanent normal trade relation status. Currency is important, but so are a number of China's other other policies, and that's part of what we'll be talking about the next couple of days.
Mr. Ambassador, our last minute today, the AFL-CIO, the United Steelworkers Union, they came out in opposition of the administration's trade agreement with South Korea. The AFL President Rich Trumka said in a statement, the labor movement's concerns about the deal go to, quote, a fundamental question about what a fairer and more balanced trade policy should look like. Is this deal going to cost American jobs, as the union suggests?
Absolutely not. And I very much respect the opinion of President Trumka and others. But what I'm more impressed with is the steelworkers did issue a press release today praising our administration for taking the strong stance to protect American workers that we did in the 421 case. And with respect to the proposed Korea trade agreement, it has been endorsed by both the United Auto Workers, who are most directly affected by this, and the United Food and Commercial Workers. It is a very balanced agreement. It's one that has the potential to help us add almost 70,000 jobs and protect the over 250,000 jobs that are already tied to our exports to Korea. And it's gathered broad-based support from business, from ranching and agricultural industries, and broad bipartisan support on Congress.
All right. The U.S. Trade Representative Ron Kirk joining us from Washington. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us here on Bloomberg. We appreciate it.
Mark, thank you much, and I would invite your listeners to visit us at ustr.gov if they want to learn anything more about any of the issues we discussed today.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.